There was a time when people believed that the sun revolved around the earth. There was a time when people thought that the earth was the centre of the universe. There was a time when people thought that volcanoes were gods. There was a time when Thor threw lightning bolts. All of these things were arguments ad populum. Lots of people believed it, and therefore you should too. It's a really poor argument, and it's fallacious because it actually has nothing to do with evidence and a great deal to do with people's opinions, and people can be wrong. Just listen to what Pastor Tom Brown has to say about atheists.
Atheism doesn't have common sense. You see, almost the entire world, more than 90% of the world, believes in some form of deity or God that has made the world. Less than 10% of the world's population is atheistic or agnostic. Do you realize that? A very small percentage. Now, do you realize it's hard to get almost the entire world agreeing on anything when it comes to politics, social issues?
That's argument ad populum.
Morality. I mean, there's just, 60-40%, you know what I mean? And if it's 60-40, then that's a big percentage. That's like a landslide in an election. But when you have 90% or more believing in God or some form of God who made the world, then that ought to tell you something, that being an atheist and an agnostic makes no common sense.
That's interesting, isn't it? Believing in God or some form of God. What he seems to be saying is that the more people believe it, the more likely it is to be true. Do you realise, Tom, that the vast majority of Christians are Roman Catholic? So maybe you're wrong.
How could you, if you're an atheist, say, well, I'm right and almost the entire world is wrong? That almost sounds like a conspiracy theorist.
Well, there's not a problem with that because, quite frankly, as you are demonstrating here, common sense really isn't very common.
You're always going to get a small percentage of doctors or lawyers, small percentage of ministers that's going to hold to some outlandish lie.
Well, we don't. What we say is we're not convinced by what you say. I'm not saying I'm right about anything. I'm simply saying I'm not convinced that you're right.
We call it conspiracy theories.
You seem to be mixing things up here. Basically, it's a false equivocation. There is no conspiracy theory in simply not being convinced by your claim that a God exists.
But that's what atheists and agnostics are doing.
No, it doesn't. I'm simply saying I don't believe you about your conspiracy.
They're holding to an idea that hardly anyone accepts to be true. And yet an atheist, an agnostic, thinks their idea is the right one.
I'm not holding to an idea about God. I'm simply saying I don't accept your idea about God. I have no idea here except to say that I do not believe your idea.
And there is validity in common sense. Common sense is simply that. It means it is a knowledge in which most people agree to be true.
There's an awful lot of error and folly in following the herd, regardless, when you're not interested in evidence.
And if you can't accept what most people agree to be true,
but that doesn't make it right,
then we really can't have debates or arguments.
Well, of course we can. That's just a nonsense claim. I can talk to people about popular beliefs and not accept them.
This is why common sense is an important tool in debate.
No, it's not a tool in debate. It might be a cop-out to say, but everybody agrees with me, but it's not a tool because it doesn't address an argument.
Atheists and agnostics are rejecting what is common sense to the rest of the world.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. I reject common sense because it's not a reliable way to work out what's true.
And that alone ought to show you how suspect their belief that God doesn't exist or that he's not likely to exist is such a fallacy.
No, the fallacy we're talking about here is the argument ad populum. That's the only fallacy. Me failing to be convinced because you have given me no evidence isn't fallacious, but your argument ad populum very definitely is.
It shows you their error in their thinking, and it confirms what the Bible says, that a fool has said, not a smart person, a fool has said, there's no God.
Which demonstrates a number of things. First of all, it demonstrates that even in the times when the Bible was being written, there were people who denied the existence of God because they were not convinced by the arguments put forward. That's the first thing. The second one is, why are you calling me a fool? You don't know me. I simply am not convinced by you because you have given no evidence to convince me.
Because it doesn't make any common sense.
Really? Is that the best you've got?